Esther, founder and chief visionary for Mind Myself, and it is my pleasure to bring this event with five practitioners. We advertised six, but one of our practitioners could not get his shift covered. And so we're down to five. So that's why we're at five. And Mind Myself, I am thrilled to have this global online service for women 40 to 55 plus. Men are welcome too, but that's the goal as we're talking to women. And we want you to help to feel seen and heard and supported. We want to provide you with information to help you start asking the right questions for you. We have events tailored to your needs, your wants, your desires, and this platform is there and available to you for free. We also have, and you're going to hear from five of them today, amazing practitioners who are doing such good work in the world from the complementary, holistic, and integrative perspective. And you may hear some disagreements today. That's okay. Differing opinions make the world interesting, but I know that we're all here because we want to disrupt things in the most positive way and for everybody's benefit. And your call to action really is to help you become your own best health advocate because nobody else is going to do it as well as you. So we want to help you learn how to do that and be that better for yourselves. So today we are talking about what is women's health really? And did you know that the studies about health did not include women or female of the species until the 1990s? That's not very long ago. So women's health is something very clear and very specific. Maybe it's a bit amorphous sometimes, but it's different. We're not just mini men. We're just not. So you're going to hear some different perspectives about what that all looks like today. And to kick us off, we have two sponsors. One of our sponsors is going to be sharing for about a minute or two about an incredible product specifically for women, and it's called Women's Lib. So Eva, do you want to talk to us for just a minute or two about your product? We're so grateful to have you as our sponsor.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for hosting and getting us all together. And it's daunting to start a conversation about women's wellness when we talk about a product, because I think that in fact, one of the things that happens is that women's wellness gets segregated into specific columns: bone health, digestive health, cardiovascular health. And I created a product to help with libido, which is sexual wellness, which is an even more shunned component of women's wellness. I believe it's a really necessary and important component of women's wellness, but that is not always what women need to be focused on, right? It's all about the holistic picture of how these systems integrate and work together. And I think it's important to talk about how women are so individualistic in their needs and how they respond and react to transition. So I came to this product because I began the transition into perimenopause by noticing, with the help of my loving husband, a dip in my libido. And that was the trigger that helped me to understand, oh, I think I'm in a moment of transition. But what started to happen, interestingly, is I reflected on, oh, my skin is changing, my hair is changing, and I became very vain, more vain, than I had been in other, segments of my life. And I started to focus on those things because those are things that are visible, that are out in front of the world. And I didn't really recognize how important it was to deal with the relational transition that happens internally. And that's what led me to creating a women's libido product. Because once I started to understand how estrogen and testosterone work together to support a libido, I started to feel like, oh, I'm back to myself again. And back into a healthy part of my relationship. I feel more confident. I'm able to ask deeper questions, and I'm just have a better understanding of my own physical wellness as a whole. And so anyway, that's how I came to Women's Lib, and I'm happy to talk about the product or talk to any of you individually if you have questions about Women's Lib and what it does. And I'll put the link to our website in the chat. But overall, I'm just so happy to be here and happy to be part of the conversation.
Great. Thank you so much, Eva. And just as a final thing, it's plant-based.
Yeah.
And do you want to just say one line about plant-based and the source of ingredients?
Yeah, so I'm 47, and I'm not quite ready yet to do the dive into hormone replacement therapy. These things are on my radar. That's part of why I'm happy also to be here to learn from all of you and experts in the field and to gather all the information, how to ask the right questions. But our product has three ingredients only: epimedium for vasodilation, shatavari is a estrogen mimetic, and tonkat ali is a testosterone grabbing a holder. It's a grabber holder of testosterone that's already in your body and makes it more functional. So
Is
these,
that the scientific term, grabber or holder of?
yeah,
Like it.
that's the medical term is the grabber holder. Dr. Nalima, don't please, you can correct me, but what Tonkat Ali does, and we know this from documentation and research because it's actually a well-researched product. Why? Because men actually use it more than women. So it's got great documentation on what it can do to help support and bolster testosterone. And as you all may know, testosterone and estrogen are a really happy marriage to support a healthy libido. So that's why Women's Lib is so effectual.
Thank you so much, Eva. We're
Thank
glad you are
you.
here. Thanks for sharing that. And have fun listening to all this great conversation that's going to emerge. Now, the contact information for Eva is in the chat, and also the affiliate link for um, Women's Lib is there if you're interested in exploring that further. Women's health needs to be front and center. It often isn't, but it needs to be. Cynthia Nixon said this in her university thesis called Propositions. Our practitioners here today are going to share about some fascinating things that they have experienced over the course of their practices over the years. Dr. Vicky Monlock, MD, comes to us from Wisconsin. Neelima Deshpande comes from Pune, India. Darren McConaughey comes from Florida. He's originally Canadian, though. He jumped ship. And David Allen Tracy, I think he was originally Canadian too. And he now, as of like, I don't know, 3 weeks ago, lives in Phoenix, Arizona. And Sherry Strong lives in, I think it's Silver Hills. Did I get that right, Sherry?
Silver Sands.
Silver Sands, Alberta. And I am coming to you from BC in Canada. So we have a global representation, certainly North America right now, mostly, but then we have India in the house too. Before we get diving into the questions, I would love for each of you practitioners to introduce yourself briefly and a sentence or two about who you are and what you do. Sherry Strong, start us off.
Okay, well, I am a food lover. I've owned two holistic cooking schools, one in Melbourne, Australia, one in Vancouver. I branded myself as a food philosopher for many years, and I don't know if they're past or future lives explicitly, but if there's such a thing, I came to this incarnation for the food. And so my balance is to not just love food, but love how it makes my body feel and share and help people return to eating real food.
Fantastic. And we have two chefs in the house. David's also one too. But you can get into that, David, too. Darren, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, I'm a manual practitioner, an osteopathic practitioner, athletic therapist, movement coach. I combine all of those things to help people really find solutions to their pain, whether it's chronic pain or injuries that they haven't been able to solve elsewhere. I've heard the word disruptor. I would liken myself to a bit of a disruptor in the field, looking at things very holistically and integrative from a musculoskeletal perspective, but also from a psychosocial perspective.
Thanks, Darren. Vicky.
Hi, I'm a retired OBGYN, again from Wisconsin. I spent my practice from residency, actually medical school forward, disrupting the world of women's health because I felt we were missing more than we were getting. And so my practice centered on the individualistic approach to educate and empower women. I did research on my patients, wrote books about developing the curves for age appropriate hormone levels as we go through our menstrual career and through menopause.
Thank you, Vicky. Dr. Nilima.
I'm also an OBGYN. I've worked in India, the UK, Bhutan, and I noticed that there's a huge gap between where women want to be and where they're beginning. And the work I do around movement, nutrition, and mindset helps women to navigate these years of transition so that they come out as their best selves.
Thank you. David.
Yeah, so I am a, certified theta healing practitioner. I deal a lot with energy work as well as inner healing trauma through brainwaves. I'm also a certified herbalist, certified chef. Have training in fermentation extensively, even through Harvard, and then I'm a nutrition coach as well. My whole thing is really just about navigating the complexity of the human body, from like the body, the mind, and the spirit, how it's all interconnected. And if we can get those things aligned and working symbiotically, we can feel amazing. But when one of those things off, other things feel off as well.
Balancing it all. Thank you so much. Let's jump into the questions. Nilima, if you could start us off, I have this question for you. How have you seen the definition of women's health evolve over the course of your career?
Actually, there wasn't a definition of women's health. There was just the World Health Organization's definition of health, which said it's not merely the absence of disease, but total physical, mental, spiritual, and social well-being. But when you look at women's health, it's been restricted to reproduction, producing more babies. For time immemorial, almost nobody ever considered that women deserved better care so that they could age gracefully. It's the changing times over the last 50 years that we've seen more research emerge into healthy aging, longevity, well-being, and quality of life of women's health as they age. And particularly changes in sexual health and well-being have been at the forefront only, I think, in the last 20 years or so. So there's been a huge, there's been a sea, it's kind of a wave that's transitioned, and we're seeing the wave transition from a focus on men's health gradually to a focus on empowering women, because they've started to realize that if they don't look after women, the men don't get looked after either.
And so there. Vicky, can you tell us what gaps in women's health education do you wish were addressed earlier in life?
Oh boy, we only have a couple of sentences to say that,
Oh, a
Anthony.
couple minutes. You get a couple minutes.
Well, in as far as gaps, there was the emphasis, as you mentioned, that there was no research done on women because we were just mini men, and it was immoral to do research on women because we were the carriers of babies, and so we couldn't disrupt that temple of a woman's body. But gaps in women's health, first of all, honesty in research, because so much research has been done that has been biased and has taken the wrong conclusion to what the actual results were. And the biggest one is the Women's Health Initiative. It was a total travesty of interpreting the results, and nobody did anything about changing it. Thus, it changed the course of women's health since 2002, and we're still reacting to that misinformation. Other studies have been done, they've been ignored as not having the same number of patients, not having the same power as WHI. WHI Women's Health Initiative is still considered the gold standard in this country, which I consider absolutely ludicrous. So we need better research, and we need research in all the areas of women's health. So GAPS is adequate research that docs can actually say, there's something to this, but then we have to remember research is something that is in the past, so to speak. We're looking at past trends. We need to look forward and how we individualize women's treatment based on perhaps their genetics, based on their lifestyle, and based on telling people what their lifestyle should be for longevity. And they call that medicine 3.0. So I'll talk more about that as we go.
Excellent. Medicine 3.0. Maybe it's 5.0 we need now. I mean, I think we need to make some significant jumps from what can be sometimes considered a sick care system into an actual healthcare system. What an idea, right? Sherry, let's go to the food perspective. What is your philosophy about how food plays into the whole conversation about women's health?
Well, originally women were the
I don't
keepers
say
of the
food
food, the
perspective.
prepared.
Sorry, Siri interrupted me. Sorry. Carry on.
That's all right. Yeah, so as you know, I wrote a book called Return to Food, The Life-Changing Anti-Diet was the original subtitle, and when I re-released it, it was called How Going Back, Return to Food, How Going Back is the Way Forward. And those two things really sum up. One of the things I often say is that the cultures, with the least amount of nutritionists, scientists, dietitians, actually have a much healthier relationship with food. And the more that we've actually pathologized and broke things down to a micro level, as opposed to understand the macro of how we're meant to eat as the human species, the more confused we've got. And so the system we're in likes to make things complicated and super easy. And in nature, it's very simple, but it requires effort. And so what's happened is we have a present system that's hijacked the fact that we are kept so busy, so distracted, and have gone away from understanding how we're meant to eat. And so I teach in philosophies that are very feminine, very, Mother Earth is Gaia, but very much a belief that there was an intelligent design and creator that made things actually simple for us, but we had to put in effort. And so our desire for convenience and our natural addictive nature has been hijacked and weaponized against us in the supermarket. And so I just help people return to understanding how we're meant to eat. And it's an anti-diet philosophy. And it does encompass, we're not just a mouth and a digestive system. We are a mental, emotional, spiritual, as well as physical being. And when we eat holistically, not just holistic in whole foods, seasonal, local, organic, and whole, but we eat as a whole human, we will naturally develop a healthier relationship with food, our body, and the world we live in.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. Darren, from your perspective as an osteopathic practitioner, working with athletes, etc., how does physical alignment and musculoskeletal health influence, say, women's health in general, but hormone balance and vitality?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. I mean, the word alignment sort of triggers a lot in the manual therapy world. It's it's like, well, if we just crack this or pop that, we're going to be fixed. And so maybe I'll try to correct the language around alignment. Generally speaking, we're not trying to realign things when we practice manual therapy, or we shouldn't be. Um, it's things that should maybe move better that don't, and we're trying to free those areas to provide better allowance for movement. Um, the body's constantly compensating for lack of range or injuries or surgical scars, and it has a tremendous ability to do this, and it's good. But as we get older, that compensation starts to become less and less and less, and disease will eventually set in. We move less. Um, our ability to affect our sleep, our digestion. So I think when I specifically apply it to women's health, and whether it's hormonal or menstrual issues with women, I think of um, around the cervical region that can be impacted heavily by compensation. So your eyes need to maintain level with horizon at all times. Otherwise, we fall on our face. And so if there's something that is off with your ankle, say you sprained it recently and you've had to limp, well, now your cervical region has to adjust to maintain that level with horizon. Now, what really important gland is in the neck? It's our thyroid. And how many women suffer from thyroid issues? Countless. Countless women suffer from thyroid issues. And so the cervical fascia around the neck can compress that area. But even if we look from like your upper T spine, where the sympathetic nervous supply comes from, or to the thyroid, you can start to trigger a fight or flight sequence that just is hard to break. And so, how does manual therapy or osteopathy help? Well, we look at those areas that are restricted or not moving the way they should, whether it's down in the foot ankle or directly, in the area of the neck that could be impacting something like the thyroid. And we start to free those areas, which has cascading effects, right? Like the thyroid, how many functions? I'm sure there's people that can speak better to this, but body temperature, metabolism, heart rate, so many things are affected by the hormones that are produced by the thyroid. And so the structure can affect the function, and function can affect the structure, right? So this is the, where osteopathy, I would say, sort of fits in, or manual therapy fits into this conversation.
Fabulous. I love it. We're just going to touch the surface here tonight. I know this, but there's so many opportunities to dig deeper as well. David, I know you work with trauma as well. You've mentioned a number of things, and you do theta healing. So how does energy healing or theta healing intersect with women's physical and emotional health?
Well, I think from a foundational standpoint, we are all energy. At the molecular level, we are energy, we are energy, we are energy. But I would say that historically and in the present, women give, they give, and they give, and they give. Okay? They give. And that is by nature, women are more nurturing. Women bear, women carry, whether children, loved ones, people in family, in society. Historically, women have carried. And it is often the case with the I work predominantly with women because although I have many men come to me, but women are often depleted. Women are often burnt out and they're in a functional freeze state. Their nervous systems they're going through each day and they're completely worn out. So this component of coming into this awareness, first of all, that they are seen, they are loved, that they can take time for themselves, take time to receive and to be nourished, energetically speaking, spiritually speaking, and so forth, is something they don't often get. I've worked with women who go many years without even having a day off, especially because I grew up in Latin America, in the jungles of Panama amongst indigenous tribes. Those women never get a day off. They're working every day of the year. They don't get time off after they bear children. They have no support systems. Now they do have herbal things they'll do, and some women will come around them, but societally, they're kind of left on their own while the men get to take time off. And so when I do energy work with women, we start with a sense of awareness that first they have value, that they need time for rest. We make allowances for how they actually feel. How do you really feel? There's a lot of guilt that women will carry because they feel like they're not doing enough. There's a lot of sense of concern and worry for their children's upbringing or anyone in life, right? Um, um, and also, then from there, we get into alignment. What is true? What is true about you? What is true about who you are? And beyond being a wife, a mother, or a friend, who are you as a woman, an empowered woman? And then fourthly, coming into this place of awakening. Now, this is all happening through the theta brainwave state and through energy stuff, which I won't dive into, but really it's in those 4 steps of allowing women to become empowered, not just in the archetype of a mother, not just in the archetype of, say, the wife, but a queen or a goddess for that sake. You are the moon, and there are cycles. And so to be aware of these cycles, to be aware of the fact that you are going to change more so than men, cyclically, and that is the way you are designed. And so to be aware of that is to celebrate who you are and to, in that place, really treat yourself as the temple you are.
Thank you, David. I'm just loving this conversation so far. Vicky, if you could if you could change one thing about the current women's health system, being the rabble rouser that you are,
Mhm.
what would it be?
I would like to see medicine go toward that proactive versus reactive approach.
Mm,
We too often wait for a problem to happen and then go, oh, I've got a pill to fix that. And it's not unique to women's health. That's medicine, Western medicine in general. What we need to realize is that health is the balance of the foundation of our hormonal system, all of our hormones, our female, our insulin, our thyroid, our cortisol, they all interplay and they all have to balance with each other to make this orchestra of our body work in harmony. And so if we can get medicine to understand that you don't look at menopause and perimenopause as anything other than, oh my gosh, that's just hormone loss and good for you, the curse is gone. That is so 1800s. We have to look at what that transition means for prevention of disease, chronic disease, prevention of Alzheimer's. How does that loss of hormone change the balance of those four hormone groups, like four legs of a chair? How does that impact longevity? Because longevity is not just what happens today and I'm in a nursing home tomorrow. It's what happens with a bodily change that may be subtle or not so subtle, and how that impacts us 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road. And are we preparing ourselves and our patients properly to plan for that? Or are we simply reacting? Again, being proactive, individualistic, and planning for and strategizing for longevity is, I think, what is missing. And that's what I would love to see happen in Western medicine as we evolve.
Thank you. Sherry, food is a deeply cultural, relational, and an emotional way of being, especially for women. How can women work with that emotional aspect, in particular, say, shame, addiction, social pressure, in a healing way rather than a restrictive way?
Well, as you mentioned, uh, you're aware that I have a program that helps people beat sugar and junk food addiction. And one of the things that people say about 4 weeks into the program, when we actually get them ready to give up sugar, is they're like, oh, we thought this was going to be a food program, but it's really a self-love program. And what I find typically when I started to work with people, if I got them working on just the food, don't eat this, eat that, they had this kind of level of success. When I started to get them into the kitchen to prepare their own food and go to farmers market and source their own food, they had this level of success. And when I help them understand the philosophies of how we're meant to eat as the human species optimally, which is very working seasonal, local, organic, whole, slow is the acronym. They had this level of success. But then when I help them understand that it's most people who have issues around food, it's not that they don't know what to eat or, they just don't like the things that are good for them. It's more often not, they're not just toxic physically, but they have toxicity mentally, emotionally, spiritually as well. And so what I realized is if I could start to get people to remove the toxicity in the emotional, mental, and spiritual side and nourish in each of those quadrants, that making those changes in the physical becomes natural, it becomes easy, and it pulls us towards making really nourishing choices in the physical when we're nourishing in these other areas of our life.
Thank you. And I'm seeing lots of head nods. So far, we haven't had much disagreement, but hey, agreement is good too. And practitioners, there are some fabulous questions in the chat. If you feel like you can still pay attention and address some of those, because we won't get to probably all the questions that are coming through the chat. So feel free to engage in that way if you like. Darren, what are the most common movement or postural issues affecting women, and how can we prevent those?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think as a society as a whole right now, I think men and women are suffering from similar things. Sitting too much, screen time, looking down, slumped forward. Like these are common things, whether male or female. Um, I do think that women adds there's another layer of complexity when you add in, childbearing. Obviously, that's going to change posture. It's going to change the body. It's going to destabilize their core system and their ability to sort of uh, manage load after everything becomes lax. Um, but at the heart of it, I think the primary difference I see with women is they tend to think of others more than themselves. Men tend to be, and this is a broad generalization, but men tend to be a little bit more selfish, and women will always put others ahead of themselves. If it's a family structure, it's their kids, it's their husband. And so their dedicated time to working on their posture or their movement becomes smaller. Um, Women generally, in my opinion, don't strength train enough to counteract these postural issues. And when they do get the time to go and do these things, they generally lift up 2.5 pound dumbbells and do it 85 times. And they think that this is helping them in their strength gains. And all it's really doing is wasting their valuable time, right? Women need to put on muscle and get strong. And this isn't meaning, women are scared of being bulky and like, I'm going to be too big and not attractive. And this is just not true. Lifting heavy weights on a smaller rep count is not going to put on bulk. It's going to put on decent muscle mass, and it's going to the benefits are tremendous. I mean, we're seeing all of the, you know, uh, so, like the problems with sarcopenia, osteoporosis, um, and primarily this is because women don't take the time because they're dedicated in other areas of their lives, and B, when they do take the time, I think that they're putting it in the wrong direction. And I think the message is changing, and I think you're seeing that with women returning to gyms and doing strength-based workouts. Um, but I think there's still more work to be done there.
For sure. And we don't want to waste our time, do we? We want to make it productive, and we want to move us forward in the best possible
Uh,
directions.
Less is more.
There you go. David, can you share a case where emotional and herbal work created a breakthrough?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is kind of my way of life in general, right? There's when I work with my clients, women will come to me saying, um, I'm struggling with depression, and it might be might be menopause or might be perimenopause or something, but basically it's we'd go to the root cause, right? The whole point is the root cause. So the idea being that we go into trauma from childhood, of all things. What does that have to do with today, right? Everything, because the things that we go through in life are very, very cyclical in general. We tend to repeat patterns over and over and over again. And so there can be this sense of it, you name it, something that mom said when you're 5 to you, or something that dad said to you, or a sibling, and it stuck with you. And then you ended up shifting that into how you had your first boyfriend, and then eventually you get married and you relate to your husband that way, or whatever it is, and then your kids and your coworkers and your boss, and these cycles happen. And so it can be a hormonal matter, it can be depression, it can be trauma, and herbs kind of come into the mix on many fronts. We can look at like the fact of women struggling with not being able to sleep at night, as an example. Like how many women after they have babies sleep well? Like hardly ever. And like they go years not sleeping well. And how does that affect their hormones after the fact? And so sometimes it can be trauma, and it can be like they have anxiety or depression, and other times it can be something related to not being able to sleep, and then their hormones are completely out of whack. And so I might administer ashwagandha or something, to help calm at night. And just that simple act of sleeping better can help them with their hormones. Not carrying anxiety from trauma, that worry or the guilt, and then having an herb that goes with it to help them sleep. Just that one night of sleep can make a big difference for the next day, because now their nervous system is in a more relaxed state and they're not feeling overwhelmed. So it's a simple answer because it's really no one size shoe fit all. Every single case is completely different, and every trauma is different. Every woman's body is different. Every age, as Dr. Vicky mentioned, every age is completely different, and there can be so many factors. So it is really about a combination of knowing the herbs and knowing the woman, and also having intuition, and then seeing what works and what doesn't work, and listening to the body, listening to her body, and she is listening to her body as well.
Yes, back to the becoming our own best health advocate. If we don't listen, then we can't take our steps forward because no one else knows what's going on inside of here. Thank you, David. Neelima, how do cultural narratives about menstruation, fertility, menopause, etc., impact women's health choices?
Culture, I mean, I've lived in the UK for 15 years. I've lived in India, grown up in India, educated, and I've been here. And cultural narratives often reflect the values that different systems where women live and work and contribute to bring about. And these cultural narratives then affect how women actually even talk about their problems, the language, the words we use to describe problems or suffering. Women generally, like David talks about, expect to suffer, and they wear suffering like a badge of honor. And this is common, doesn't matter which part of the world women emerge, because the system that glorifies women's suffering is what leads to them not taking good care of themselves. There's a kind of reward in sacrifice. You know, this whole thing about sacrificing yourself for the betterment of men or children or families is what defines whether women even think they have a problem or not, which is something I see, and I'm sure Dr. Vicky also sees this all the time at menopause and transition. When we look at things like, I mean, I've just written down a few points about each one: menstruation, fertility, and menopause, and I'll just take a minute to just pinpoint some of them. For example, in India, menstruation, 80% of girls in rural areas will not complete school because there aren't toilets in schools. Sanitary protection is not available. They don't know how to dispose of sanitary protection. With the current lifestyles in the cities, things like polycystic ovaries, endometriosis, fibroids, obesity, teenage diabetes is huge in a country like India, which is basically malnourished. It begins with malnutrition. And these people, the discrepancy between urban and rural is actually a huge problem, because menstruation never gets addressed in the way it needs to be addressed, the way David is doing it. Because that narrative, that cultural narrative, is affecting society, the family, and that girl's understanding of what's happening to her body. When you look at fertility, like I talked about, you know, you just looked at somebody who replaces the male force, and the men who go out there to work and fight the real battles, and the women are protected as the weaker sex just to create more babies. And in a country like India, which actually needs better primary health care, we don't have it. There's an extreme shortage of OBGYNs, family care doctors. And what we have is a burgeoning of fertility clinics, IVF, because that's what brings in money. So then women become cash cows, not just even in the medical system. And that's atrocious. And when you look at menopause and aging and longevity, again, you're cash cows, because incontinence, osteoporosis, fractures, all this creates more income for an industry that's catering to you living suboptimally. It's catering to keeping women stuck in living poor quality lives. Because the simple things that David talks about, or Darren talks about, or Sherry talks about, doesn't make money. So that's the changing narrative of funding, of the biopsychosocial cultural narrative, which is coming about, but which hasn't reached the family, which looks after women. The family, not just the nuclear family, but the world family, which doesn't prioritize women actually claiming their place and their help to live that good life.
Thank you, Neelima. Vicky, I
Yeah.
wasn't going to do the same question, but I would like you to respond to that one, please.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. You could see I was just kind of-
Yes.
yeah, because I want to address it from the melting pot of what North America has with the immigrants that have piled into Western countries and how those women are treated. And there is a huge trust issue because there's language barriers and there are barriers of women want their family, they want especially for childbearing, they want a doula, they want somebody there to advocate for them because that's what they're used to, and they don't get that recognition in a Western society. And usually they're told they have to go to a hospital, which is foreign to them. They don't have a voice at a hospital. The nursing staff and the doctors don't understand where they're coming from. They'll kick the family out of the room. And then when there's failure to progress in a labor pattern, they simply jump to a C-section instead of explaining to the patient what may or may not be going on. So it is a total dismissal almost of the rights of that woman because they don't understand her culturally, or they don't understand her language, or her family's trying to advocate for her and they won't allow it just because it's their professional discomfort that won't allow that to happen. So there are so many issues depending upon, and in India, there are so many, levels of rural versus urban. And as you mentioned, there's just this huge discrepancy that we can't even imagine in the US, but there are other issues of people coming to a more Western country where we think, how could people be treated the way they're being treated even here? Because they're not being heard, they're not being advocated for, their family is being dismissed, they are being dismissed. And that's kind of the nature of women's health, is we're second-class health citizens, and it shouldn't be that way.
No, and that's why we're doing things like today and why we're standing up and all of us being rabble rousers. Okay, time being so limited. Darren, can osteopathy play a role in supporting women through these transitions, whether it's pregnancy, fertility, menopause? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, certainly. I think it's one piece of a bigger puzzle. I mean, obviously, Sherry, and nutrition and like uh, lifestyle, sleep, like there's so many other factors, but yes, can it play a role? Certainly. I think it really comes down to, if I'm the first person somebody, a woman comes and sees, I want to be the person that helps them find the root of their problem, or what they've come to see me for. Um, and sometimes that's in manual therapy, and sometimes it's not. Can it always help? Certainly. Case in point, Esther, you know about my history with a thesis on. I did my thesis on breast implant illness, and it was based on a client of mine that came in with hip pain. Long story short, um, it wasn't her hip. She had been around the block. She'd seen multiple practitioners. She was about to have surgery on a minor labral tear in her hip. Um, but it really came down to her symptoms were related to implants that she had put in 10 years prior. And we certainly helped her a lot and took away a lot of pain through manual therapy, working on her diaphragm, working on the scars. But it wasn't the thing that solved her problem. It got her maybe 50 to 80% better, but she became dependent on treatment and exercise. And if she stopped either one of those, she would fall back into debilitating pain where she was limping and using a cane. The thing that solved it was an explant surgery. And so I helped her find that, and manual therapy got her there. But it wasn't the solution. So it definitely is a piece of the puzzle. And I can give you stories of other people that it was the solution. It was rooted in a biomechanical issue that we solved with therapy and movement. But often, more times than not, it's never just one thing. It's a combination of multiple factors. Um, and one can be a little bit more of a priority over another, but you really got to look at the bigger picture. If you have the tools, the more tools you have in your toolbox, the better, but also um, the more practitioners you have, the other, the network that you have that you can get your client to that, you know, say it's a nutrition. I can tell pretty early in my assessment if this is going to be a biomechanical issue or it's a lifestyle or it's a nutrition or it's something beyond my scope. Have a network of people that you can say, hey, I need you to go and see this person and get them there as quickly as possible. Don't waste their time. And so, yes, like I said, osteopathy is a huge part, but it's part of a much bigger picture.
That's great, Darren, and that's so important. In Mind Myself, we're talking about complementary, holistic, and integrative health. We need sometimes more than just one practitioner. And I know budget can be a factor, but consulting different people, you don't even now with Zoom, you don't even have to be in the same city. Look at, we have 5 amazing practitioners. You could have a conversation with any one of them at any time. Well, according to their schedules, but
Yeah.
yes, I think, and all of those factors are really important. Sherry, over to you. Given this conversation, and then how do you approach creating recipes or meal plans that support gut health, detox, and vibrant immunity without diet mentality?
So I believe that our bodies are incredibly versatile and that we can thrive in a diverse, environment. So there's Inuits, their traditional diet. If we look at that, the traditional African diet, any traditional culture, they didn't have meal plans. They didn't have, macro and micronutrient analysis of their food. They were eating nutrient dense food. So, what I help people do is to look at what they are eating now. Number one, with everything, you have to stop the poisoning. It doesn't matter what great diet you're on or supplement regime you're on, or all the positive input you have. If you're poisoning yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and right now we are under such threat environmentally in almost absolutely every area, that we have to look at that first, because you can be doing all the good things, but if you don't stop the poisoning, you're not going to root cause. And certainly looking at modalities and foods and supplements and those things that don't actually contribute to that poisoning. So I get people to work within their concept of a traditional diet, something that feels natural to that, but finding the most holistic versions of that and helping them to realize that the nutrient profile, this whole thing, I am a rebel in that. I'm not a big fan of, you have to have very specific diet, that kind of thing. I believe that if you stop poisoning yourself and you have a nutrient dense diet, no matter kind of what area of the planet you're in, and you're eating seasonally, locally, and whole food, that your body will actually thrive no matter what. So I avoid meal plans. I give people lots of options, give them lots of recipes to work with if they don't have them themselves. Look at what they are eating, help them to understand where they are actually, creating imbalance and toxicity through what they're eating, and then inspire them through simple, delicious recipes that they can actually make with local ingredients that inspire them to, oh my goodness, that did not take so long. That was absolutely delicious. And I feel so much better after eating it. You don't have to have complex menus, recipes, or meal plans. And if you can actually get into the kitchen and source really good food and prepare it with love, that's to me the best prescription that you can give someone for health.
I love it. And healthy food doesn't have to taste disgusting. It usually tastes much, much better. Much, much better. David, okay, and you could follow along in that as a chef, all of these things. But my question for you, how can women use plant medicine to restore balance after chronic stress or trauma? This is kind of a tangent, but it's really part of this whole conversation.
Yeah, so like chronic stress and trauma are like two of the biggest disruptors of women's health today. Like, let's just be real. They're carrying and carrying, right? Like I said earlier. So when the body experiences trauma, whether it's like physical, emotional, or even passed down, because that's often the case, right? Mother passes it down to the daughter, or the mother-in-law has expectations, whatever it is. You can be in a prolonged state of like fight, flight, or freeze. And that means that your adrenals are constantly releasing cortisol, digestion slows down, the reproductive and immune system begins to take a back seat. And over time, you create this sense of exhaustion, anxiety, insomnia, and then maybe even autoimmune conditions. So when you're in that place of depletion, this is where we bring in adaptogens. That's like my favorite thing. So these are plants that help the body to adapt to stress and restore the equilibrium. So this might be your hypothalamus, your pituitary, your adrenal network. I mentioned ashwagandha earlier, so like that's very common in Ayurveda. It's both grounding and rejuvenating. It supports the thyroid, adrenal function while calming like your overactive mind. And it's really excellent for people who are tired. Okay, so we also have holy basil or tulsi. This has more of like a spiritual quality. It helps clear your emotional fog. It lifts the mood. It balances the cortisol levels gently. And I also administer rhodiola, which grows in like harsh and cold climates. This provides you with a wonderful remedy for fatigue, brain fog, and endurance. Alongside of adaptogens, I'll oftentimes administer nervines. This will help soothe your nervous system, like milky oat tops or lemon balm. There's so many different things. Like the reality is only 5% of all plants have been studied for their medicinal qualities. And the thing is that generationally and historically, if we look at society at large outside of the West, even people use herbs all the time. Most of our diets, and Sherry alluded to this, we're not really eating things that are medicinal, but food is medicine. And so when we can start to kind of integrate the reality that you don't have to necessarily take a capsule, although I do take it for practical reasons, and I get people on capsules regularly of herbs. This can be incorporated into your daily life through your tea ritual, through your salads and the bitter greens. And so all of these things can work in tandem. And I think I look at more as a symbiotic ecosystem of what you intake, and to do so with awareness so that really we can treat our food and our herbs and our medicine as ritual. Okay, it's ritual. We've lost that practice for the most part. We've completely lost it. And when we treat food as ritual, then all of a sudden we're basically having a spiritual and mental and physical component to this.
I love it. And let us not ever diminish foodgasms because
Yeah.
that can be part of it too, right?
Exactly.
Thank you, David. I love it. I know people laugh at me because I enjoy my food so much. So I just want to say we really should be enjoying our food. Find ways to enjoy our food. Vicky, over to you. How have you seen gender bias show up in medical research? You mentioned some of this, but and treatment for women. Maybe you can expand on that a little bit.
Well, you know, and you mentioned it at the very beginning, women's research was not even considered moral or ethical until about 1990. So we have a very short body of work on women's health and research that has even been considered valid or something that's worth doing. Then if you want anything that is preventive, you're looking at a minimum of 5 to 10 years. And if you really want a good preventive study, it's going to be longer. So, in other words, we just don't have enough longevity in looking at women's disease as well as women's health issues, much less prevention and wellness. And so, what has been completely overlooked in women's health are some of the actual diseases that, and I'll just name a few: endometriosis, fibroids, things that are heavy menstrual periods that may or may not be related to the fibroids, but in most of these cases, and I'll throw polycystic ovary in there, it's hormone imbalance that is the root cause, but nobody looks for root cause, we look for the Western medical surgical solution. What can I do? What can I cut? How can I physically eliminate? And that's the focus of research instead of stepping back and going, why do we have fibroids? Why do we have endometriosis? Is there a basis family history wise? People aren't even told there's a genetic predisposition for polycystic ovary, which is male female imbalance in a woman, which is in some cultures as much as 20% of the population of women. That's a huge percentage. Yet women are kept in the dark and they're told, oh, you have this problem, I can cover it up. And I can cover it up until it gets so bad that you need either surgery or that, we can do something to medically just cover it up and hopefully you'll get through perimenopause, menopause. So there's no look for the root cause and it's hormone imbalance. So if we could get medicine, if we could get women to understand, boy, like I go to the doc, I get my thyroid levels checked. Why can't we be scientific about our women's health issues and get our hormone levels checked? What a concept. And balance our female hormones and balance them with our male and balance them with our thyroid and our cortisol. And again, let this orchestra of our body work in harmony instead of one instrument playing off. And you can tell, you can't tell what instrument it is, but you just know you're out of tune and nobody can help you get it back in tune.
Thank you, Vicky. David, back over to you. So we have the science perspective, but also how does belief work influence the body's ability to heal?
So the mind thinks, the body does, and the body keeps the score. And the thing is that we know, and again, whether you believe in chakras or whether you believe in whatever you believe, the body keeps the score. Now, I'm not going to get into a lot of detail because there's so many stories of this, but I'm talking people who have had sexual abuse, who have sexual organ issues, from people who have been physically abused and harbor bitterness to having liver issues. You name it, it's out there. Now, this might sound woo-woo, but I've seen many cases of this over and over and over again. So we do the body work with the soul work. It goes hand in hand. And so for me, the component of it, this really comes down to all facets. And so if we're looking at this from the herbal or the molecule level, we want to get to the mitochondrial level. We want to get into the cells. If we're talking about the spiritual component of it, that's a mental and emotional, but it's beyond that. And so for so many women, like I mentioned before, I mentioned this earlier, they carry, there is a release that naturally happens in the cycles, okay? It naturally happens. So I often will tell women, as you're going through your menstruation cycle, use that as a time to release spiritually as well, as a time to let go, because you do carry. And so it's that connection between the body and the spirit. I have done energy work over people before as I'm doing theta healing, and I'm hovering over the body and we're dealing specifically with an area of trauma, and I will sense through intuition, oh, are you feeling it on your right side? And they're like, I feel a pain. And so we'll get there and I'll do a fascia release with them. And what happens, they start crying. And all of a sudden they're like, I'm starting to feel emotions from a trauma that happened with my ex years ago, and I was carrying it there. Now, this is something you won't find in a medical journal or anything like that, but I've seen it time and time again where we carry it right in the fascia, we carry it in our cells. And we know from the epigenetic standpoint, right? If we look at genomics, that whatever our environment is around us, our genes are constantly opening and closing and changing and constantly adapting. So how could not our energetic feelings, emotions, and trauma not do the same? And I think this is the future of medicine. The future of medicine is frequency, it is energy, but it's
Totally.
understanding of the body as a whole system. And I think we got to stop just addressing it from the physical.
Totally agree. I'm so loving this conversation. Sherry, in your book Return to Food, What are some principles from that book that could flesh out this conversation and more, from science to energy? Everything that happens to us is in our bodies. Uh, what can women apply immediately from your perspective, from food perspective, from the nurturing perspective?
Well, I'd really piggyback off of what David said. So much that has, and it ties in with what Bill said, don't poo-poo the woo-woo. Women's power has largely been intuition. It's a big part of our power. And tapping into, there is a knowing in your body that um, by and large, the scientific process has worked to disconnect women from their intuition. Men have it too, of course. Um, but like a woman's body knows when she's pregnant. But now we actually have to have a test done to confirm it. A body knows when it's being poisoned. It knows the substance and the entry point. And so our job is to kind of have the quiet. And that, I think that's one of the hardest things for people. They don't have time, they don't have money, resources to kind of, pursue these passive healing. And while you do need them, if you get quiet first, you can save yourself a lot of time and money, because of the tapping into the intelligence and wisdom of our own bodies. And that's like a practice. A fast, as someone mentioned, what do you think of water fasting? I'm a fan of fasting because although, I love my food and I, had issues around food deprivation from childhood trauma and things like that, I have come to learn that fasting can be just as loving as having a beautiful homemade soup or preparing a salad from the garden. So if we can actually just take time out in contemplation, prayer, meditation, whatever your practice, that resonates with you, and tap into our body and ask for guidance and direction from within, uh, we come up with solutions that, there are things that all of us who have studied on this panel and many of the knowledgeable people who are actually, listening, that we can come up with brilliant solutions, um, and save ourselves a lot of time and money if we can just tap in, learn to listen to our body, and draw from the gifts that we're surrounded by.
Thank you, Sherry. I love it. Darren, what are 3 simple movement practices that we could add to this conversation about taking care of ourselves, or that every woman can begin to integrate in her day to help balance, to be healthy?
Yeah, let me just. I wanted to just touch on David's point there, and Sherry's point, and I'll jump into that. I got really 3 quick answers for that, but I was
Great.
really
Oh, go.
I loved David's spiel there on the integration of the systems, and Sherry kind of following that up. Um, I think truthfully, science is behind the intuition of the body, and it will catch up, but we start to see things or we feel things in the clinic, like David was talking about. You do a myofascial release and somebody breaks down, because emotion's trapped in that tissue. When you work individually and you treat each person as an individual, you start to see these things that science can't capture at this point, right? N equals 1. And so we're often ahead of the curve doing what we're doing. All of us are really looking at the individual, and we're not waiting for, a study of 10,000 people to tell us that what we're doing is correct. Right. So that's my soapbox on that issue. But as far as as far as movement, three things that I would say: uh, walk, lift, and breathe, and do them if possible in community. If you hit those boxes, we overcomplicate movement way too much, and people just get paralyzed. Paralysis by analysis. We know the benefits of walking. If you can do 30 minutes a day, we know it's like a 35% reduction in cardiovascular disease. Strength training, now the science is coming out, things we know intuitively, but especially with women, I talked about earlier, as far as preventing sarcopenia, osteoporosis. Um, Breathing is massive, just from cortisol level reduction, right? Like we know there's there's tons of studies, 50% reduction in cortisol levels if you take time to slowly deep breathe and activate vagus nerve and deep diaphragmatic breathing, and community. This is coming out, especially post COVID, where people isolated themselves, and we're living in fear. And now we have this pushback of people need to be in community, and this is absolutely important. So that's why I say if you can do those three and put them in community, I think you're going to tick a lot of boxes.
Thank you, Darren. Neelima, do you have something you'd like to add to that? I have another question for you, but there's just such richness here. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, I love everything that Sherry, Darren, and David have shared, and I really I live by that, by what Darren's been talking about. And recovering from surgery myself, I can vouch for everything that they're saying, that each and every aspect of tissue healing, of restoring your mental and spiritual balance, of using physical movement in community, with friends, with loving people, reflecting back to you, um, is is foundational to healing and well-being and happiness. Bill, I've been working with Bill for nearly 2 years now, and the foundation of some of the work that he's been helping me with is bringing more joy into life, bringing more happiness, bringing that outlook of just being able to lift up your face, look at the sun, and give gratitude for being in the presence of a star. And to have somebody like Bill and US in my life has been like, it's everything that Sherry and Darren and David have been talking about.
Thank
Deep
you,
gratitude, so much
Thank you.
gratitude.
Thank you, Neelima. Let's just take a moment all together and breathe. Just like feel your feet on the ground, wherever ground you are, and let's just take a breath to the count of 5, your own time together. Let's just breathe. And hold it. And let it out. Let's do that one more time together to the count of 5. And release. Yes, thank you. And there are so many questions we have to say. The reality that we live in is we do have doctor's appointments, and ironically, Bill and I have not had a medical doctor for about 5 years, and we just found one yesterday. And we're really excited. And she's Western medicine model, but she didn't flinch when I said I was on desiccated thyroid for my thyroid issues. She didn't know what it was, but she didn't flinch. And she was open. And I just thought, yes. And we were interviewed by 2 doctors actually this week, just complete irony. And one not a fit, and she was not a fit, and we were not a fit for her with her practice. It just didn't work at all. So knowing who we are, knowing what our values are, and living out of them. Vicky, I'm going to ask a question to you. So if someone is going to a doctor's appointment, how can they navigate that in the best way possible?
Well, that's a great question. I always, the first thing a patient would say to me is, you were recommended to me. You're the 18th, 15th, whatever doctor I've seen. I don't even know why I'm here. And I would just smile and say, then you're in the right place. And I would just validate the fact that they arrived. And then it was a question of, I have issues that nobody can help me with. And I'd say, all right, I've got this resource checklist. Will you work with me for, through this checklist of symptoms for like the next 3 minutes? Okay. And we'd go down the checklist, and sometimes there's symptoms, they would mark it so hard with a pen and circle it so hard the paper would tear. And when we were done with the symptoms, they'd look at it and I'd say, okay, tell me your top three. So they'd give me the top three and I'd say, with your permission, if I can get rid of these top three, would that be okay with you? And they didn't know how to react to that because now they were given the right of refusal to get up and walk out or to stay. And the reaction from more than 90% of those patients was to immediately decompensate and just start to bawl because they couldn't believe they were heard, that they were validated with the symptoms that they showed you, and that you heard them and you were willing to work with them. And that is so powerful. People would come with the body language of this, and within 5 minutes, they were like this, and just open to what you had to share with them because you were partnering with them. And that is so huge to say, I hear you and I validate your symptoms, regardless of what those symptoms are. And so if I can give anybody advice is to be prepared to advocate for yourself. And Esther, you've said this, do a little homework, whether you show that doc your homework or not. They're going to be a little bit more respectful of the fact that you're coming in prepared to talk about your issues, not what the doc sees as your issues. Because you may say, I'm tired, and they go, oh, well, you have an insomnia issue. You need a sleep study. And you're going, but, and all of a sudden, boom, they're outside the door. So you need to know how you present yourself, and that may take a little bit of prep before you get there. And don't be afraid to ask for blood work that you want. And I would say that to my patients all the time. If you don't like what I'm saying to you, you have every right to get up and walk out and find another doctor that will listen to you. And they would just, really? They were just blown away by that. So respect your patients. Mhm.
Thank you, Vicki. And I know somewhere on the Mind Myself website there is a checklist and a blog about what to do and prepare yourself. And if you can't find it, reach out to me. We'll put my contact information in because I talk about this every time I'm on a podcast or do an interview. I share with people. And my experience of all of you this evening are you're kind, you're compassionate, you're knowledgeable, you listen to your clients or patients, and you approach a place your all conversations from a place of non-judgment and acceptance and compassion, which is what you're looking for. I think everybody is looking for that. Sherry, when you, because I know one of your passions is to help people ditch their addiction to sugar. It doesn't mean they can never have anything sweet again. You're talking about the processed sugar or the simple carbs. Can you just look, we're winding down here, but can you encapsulate that and talk about how important that is for you?
Well, there isn't a condition in the body that can't be aided by giving up refined anything. So I call it the lethal recipe: refined sugars, oils, salts, grains, chemicals, literally anything that we process or grow unnaturally is problematic to the body. And so we work on the process first of the replace principle of, rather than getting people to just give up, their sugar, I get them to find the most natural version of that or create the most natural version of that. And that'll do a few things. So one, it will stop, that poisoning to the degree. So if you say people like peanut butter cups, well, we have a natural cacao and one that's made with maca and almond butter that we get people to make. I call them nut pucks because they kind of look like pucks. And people will say that they're absolutely delicious. There's hardly any sugars in them, even natural ones. The lucuma gives a beautiful sweetness to it. So they don't actually feel like they're missing out. And so what happens is now they're, instead of consuming the cocaine or heroin of the sugar world, they're now having the opium sap or the cane juice. And that will provide nutrients to them So when they actually do give up sugar, we're weaning them off with natural things that are actually nourishing them in the process. And then as they're doing it, because they're making it themselves and the ingredients, there's some cost and effort involved, they develop a different relationship with that than something they just buy, from a supermarket, or they can actually get delivered to their door. So the process is the replace principle. Then we help them understand about, all the food processing goes in, and the consumption concept, and how we would actually make food choices in a natural environment that are very different than when we're in a supermarket. And then it's the process of, when you eat real food, you share that with people you love, including yourself. Even if you live alone, that's someone that you love. You prepare that food with love. It changes your relationship with it. And then when you work on all the other things, of course, it makes a dynamic. But just the food piece, there can be so much joy in the process of sourcing ingredients, preparing them, eating them. And I always say I'd much rather have a greasy bowl of noodles with people who are kind, positive, loving, and upbuilding, than to have the most gourmet, nutritiously prepared meal with people who are angry, depressed, and negative. But saying that, if you can have something nourishing, energizing, and protective with people who you love and care for you, and you care for them, it can be one of the most nourishing experiences, that you can actually have at least once a day.
Thank you, Sherry. Darren, what would you like to wrap up your thoughts tonight around what is women's health, and what do you want to leave people with? We'll have a few more minutes, but this is your
Sure.
chance here.
Sure. No, I think this has been a really kind of cool evening, getting different perspectives, but at the same time, hearing how similar we are. And we've never met, outside of Esther. I've never met any of the other practitioners, and it's really cool to see how similar the approach is. And I hope and pray that that's the direction that health, from a broad perspective, goes, but also within women's health, where we're looking at the individual, we're looking from a preventative perspective, we're looking from an integrative perspective, a holistic perspective, and how these systems are uh, working together and with each other, and really looking for root cause versus symptom-based care. This has truly become a passion of mine. I started in pro sports, and I always looked at things very holistically, but as my career has progressed, it has just completely moved towards um, this systematic approach, but this integrative approach that I hope and pray that the world starts to move towards. And I do see it going in this direction, which is very encouraging.
Excellent. Thank you. Neelima?
Think the future of women's health um, is going to be AI driven. Whether we like it or not, AI, lots of women use, lots of technologies coming up with AI. It's transforming how we diagnose conditions. It's transforming access to counseling services, integrating, advice about what we should read, what we should think, how we should move. It's changing how we access investigation. Certainly in India, the scene has changed so much that you don't need to request a practitioner to give you tests. You just go online, and the Tatas are transforming medicine. You can go online, book a test, and the guy will come to your door within 10 minutes, collect your blood. If you're eligible for whatever, if you need to be fasting, it'll be the next day, but in 10 minutes, and you get your reports within 2 hours. That's how fast things are happening in India right now. And it's only going to get better. And when you start moving into delivering treatments, you can get stuff delivered at home. I think the future is about having home-based integrated treatments where women can get access to healthcare guidance. No, I won't call it advice anymore, because people don't want advice. They want guidance, and then they want to be able to make their own choices, choose what kind of treatment they want, have it delivered to their doorstep, or while they're on the move, while they're doing their everyday chores. So we'll see, and it already started, because it was definitely happening in the UK when I left. But we're already seeing clinics, healthcare services, AI-generated models coming up in stores and malls, shopping areas, on the high street. That's happening. And then, of course, surgery is being transformed with robotics, AI-assisted robotics. So more and more, when you look at what the predictions are for medicine, medical care, how people access healthcare, AI is going to be a big part of it. It's going to transform our ability to choose. And I do hope that it stays in the empowered section and doesn't go down the route where a computer chip decides what you choose. I just hope that doesn't happen. I hope we retain our sovereignty. That's going to be
Right.
huge, is being able to retain our sovereignty in this era of mass production, mass guidance, everything mass related to make money for others.
David, we're going to come to you, but Vicky, do you have something that you would like to wrap up with?
I do. My hope for the future of women's health is that we become very mindful of what chronic things may happen to us, not what is the immediate effect of the here and now today. That's important. But how does that affect my health 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now? What women don't want is to hit perimenopause, menopause, and then say, okay, I may have 20 years of productive life and then my quality of life goes down. No, women want to have quality of life for a much longer period of time, and they want to be in control of that decision of what their longevity looks like. And so that does empower, their emotional state, their physical state, they have to be mindful of the fact that starts 20 years before you may ever see that Alzheimer's decline or that physical decline, or you take that step off the curb and all of a sudden you've broken a hip. Those are real things that they don't happen overnight. They started 10 years ago. They started 15 years ago. And we all need to be mindful that medicine is really, really good to fix the here and now, the acute problem, but it's really not very good at longevity and giving us long-term good health into the future that we all want.
Hmm. The future of health is frequency too. Like it really is. And light. I've been learning little bits. I'm not a practitioner, but I've had the best conversations with so many amazing people like you all tonight, and quantum biology, and we're made of light at the mitochondrial level. It only makes sense that true medicine, true healing, true health addresses our frequencies. It
Right. And,
just
our
makes sense.
mitochondria, when we're 20, work at an energy level of 85 millivolts. And as we mature, that drops. If we injure an organ, it drops faster. But once we get below 20 millivolts, cancer can take over in that organ. So, how do we re-amp back up on a cellular level to get back closer to that 85 millivolts per
And
cell?
and there are solutions.
There
I know
are.
one, and there are other solutions available too. So if you are looking for solutions, reach out. David, before you get to your wrap up, there's a question in the chat from Clan Mother Karen Ann. I don't know how to say the middle name, McDonald, and it's an open question about, and we haven't addressed this, EMFs, radiation, we'll just call it V shedding, effects on women's maternal health, emotions, hormones, and energy medicine. I know that you and I've had some conversations. We're on similar pages of things. Do you have a response for that?
Not in a short time, but I will say this.
Well, can you give a headline?
I would say, generally speaking, I would say that detoxification. Okay, so detoxification of the liver, of the kidneys, of the lungs, of the skin, the colon, and also the mind. Okay, so everything in our environment is, let's face it, toxic. Most of the things in our home are toxic, and the ceiling and the plastics and the microplastics and then the EMFs and the cell phones and so we have to constantly be in a state of detoxification. Okay. Now I'm not talking like heavy, like you're going to the restroom every 5 minutes detox. I'm talking about daily detox. And so there are herbs that are medicinal that can be taken, like burdock root or chlorophyllin. um, uh, that are going to naturally detox, or dandelion root, which we think is a weed in the yard. These things can detoxify. Now, there are formats. If you want to reach out to me, any of you after the fact, I can give you recommendations on which ones to take for different things. But I look at detox, okay? But I also look at detoxification of the mind. And this is really, and I'll wrap up with this as a time thing here, Esther. But really, the detox of the mind is not just get off this, get off this, take time away from this. There's so much garbage there. There is so much that is feeding us with fear, with anxiety. So take time to be grounded and rooted in nature, to get outside, to let your body digest that food, to pick, even if you don't have that many herbs in your garden, or just have a little pot of rosemary, it doesn't matter. Go out and pick a couple, smell them. Take time to detoxify the mind, okay? Um, for women, and I'll wrap up with this, I want to say this as a man to you, all of you women, even those who are speaking tonight. You do not need permission to be happy. You do not need permission to be sexual. You do not need permission to be emotional or not emotional. Your greatest gift is your intuition, as Sherry said. Be a woman and live and embody that womanhood. You are a gift to this world. And so do not shy away from your womanhood. Do not shy away from it. Embody it, live it. You don't need permission. And this is a mindset that's been transitioned or transferred down through millennia, where women have been suppressed and told this is your allotment in life. You are so much more than that. When women are released, women are powerful. So release.
Yes. Someone said earlier, preach it. Woohoo! I love it. All of you who are watching live today or after the fact on the recording, I want to just say all of these practitioners tonight, you can see more of them in many different ways. I have done podcast recordings with all of them. I've talked with Dr. Neelima about cultivating sexual health and intimacy, all about the vagina, painful sex, different things like that. We've had a conversation with Sherry about sweet freedom. You can learn more about the whole sugar conversation and how addictive it is. Vicky, I've done about 10 podcasts with her about the 4 legs of the hormone chair that she's talking about, and andropause, or menopause as it's called. There's so many different things. Darren, he talked about breast implant illness. We did a podcast about that, and about what is osteopathy. I have 2 of those, one from Darren's point of view and another practitioner as well. And David has shared his incredible story of how he grew up in Panama. Worth a listen. And he also talked about, we did one on trauma, I think, and then there are 2 more to come, but
Theta healing.
David's been busy. Sorry, go ahead, David.
Yeah, theta healing and
Theta
yeah.
healing, yes. And did I miss anybody? No, I think I got everybody. Yeah. So go to the website and look at those podcasts. Spend some time. There's a research. We have almost 100 right now. And yes. And Megan has put how you can reach out to each of these practitioners. It's online is the way to go. Of course, they can't do hands-on, but there's so much that can be done. And I didn't do this to make you go to a practitioner, but there's help. There is compassion. There are solutions, and there are ways to move forward. So reach out to, and if you don't like these practitioners, that's okay. We have others, and there are others in your life too. There's no pressure. You get to decide. The key is you become your own best health advocate, because that's the key. And so I want to thank all the practitioners for being here tonight and this morning, Neelima, for you it's 6, 7, 8 o'clock in the morning now for you. So you got up super early from wherever you came to us in this realm. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being on the Mind Myself platform. Thank you for sharing your heart, your expertise, your wisdom with the world, and especially with women of the world. And
And
thank you
Esther, thank you. Thank you for the invitation and the opportunity. Mhm.
My pleasure. Who knows where this ripple will go? And
Mhm.
thank you to the sponsors, BFO, Bill, and to Eva for Women's Lip. You just never know who's going to be wanting to check that out. And to my virtual assistant, Megan, she lives in Chicago and we've never actually met. And this is how the world works these days. And most of all, I want to thank you, all of you who have come here today and who are watching later. It's just so important that you're on this journey for yourself. And as Darren said, I loved it. I'm going to scroll back up to it. It's just words to continue. What did you say? Walk, lift, breathe,
Breathe
and in
in
community. I
in
think that
community.
that is just the such a good thing. And I've got a couple of quotes that I want to end with because I, I I don't, you know what? I think we'll just leave it at that. Walk, lift, breathe,
Breathe.
and do it in community. And we do all of this because you matter. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Esther. Thank you, everyone. It's been a joy.
Thank you so much. And we'll stay on for a few more minutes, but that's the official closing of what we've done. If anybody wants to come and open their mic and ask a question, this would be the time to do that.
Well, even though David and Darren have abandoned Canada, I still want to support them in their work.
Thank you,
Yes.
Bill. Thank you,
Yeah,
Bill.
no problem. No problem.
You're
Yeah,
welcome south of the border anytime.
Yeah. Perfect. Thanks all.
we
Oh,
wish you
and
were here.
Darren, I wanted to mention that I started doing strength training with a trick shoulder that would dislocate for 20 years. And after I got my shoulder back in a stable position, I got my husband to go to get rid of his slip discs and he lost his back brace. I got my oldest daughter to go because she had the same trick shoulder I had. And it was something that now, as she is married, she's gotten her husband to go. So strength training has helped everyone lose the extra weight, get the lean muscle mass, get the better body metabolism going, better sleep going. It just helps every body system. So I want
It's
to thank you for mentioning that.
It's so important. And I'm not a downer on yoga, but it's like females generally gravitate towards the Pilates, the yoga, and it's all good, but it needs to shift to like women need to be strong physically. They need
Right.
to move weight, and you're going to feel so much better, just like what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
Thank
Mm-hmm.
you. And I know there's something else I forgot to mention, which is our next event is coming up on December the 11th. We'll have another discussion like this, and we will have it's all about renewal. The title is How Renewal Calls Us to Wholeness, which is a lovely springboard to this discussion about women's health. And it's especially during the holidays, how renewal calls us to wholeness. So the link for that, we haven't finalized the page, but if you do want to sign up while you're thinking about it, there it is. So we would love for you to attend with us on that event too. Any other comments or questions from anybody? Open your mics. I know David had to go. He's unpacking, and I can't imagine the stress that he's been under. So I'm so appreciative that he was here. Any other questions before we end this? Got the last few here. No, I think we're good. Thank you again, everybody. Take care. Have a great rest of your evening. Lots of love to you
Thank
all.
you.
Mwah.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Thank